Hey guys, Poro here with another Worlds 2025 recap, this time for Day 6. We have the 0-2 matches today, which means we'll determine who the first two teams knocked out are. First up is MKOI vs Fnatic, and then after that we have VKS vs PSG. With these teams having picked up no wins, today might feel a little bit slow compared to other days. Another note is that after today, we'll be taking the next 2 days off as round 4 starts on Wednesday. Nothing else to say, let's get into the first match. Actually, Poro from the future jumping in here, I do have something else to say. I got an email 2 days ago that I didn't see until just now, but I got an official exception from Riot Games on their content policy. What this means is that I can use as many clips as I want for these game overviews, which means I can give you guys better visuals for exactly what happened in these matches. I'm super happy about this. Let's talk about Game 1. Game 1 of Fnatic MKOI was MKOI domination from start to finish. The only time Fnatic had a lead was when Jojo blew Flash aggressively mid to attempt to get a solo kill, only to be punished instantly by Razork for a 1-kill lead. After that though, Razork immediately threw it back by dying to an incredibly telegraphed invade while his own Flash was down, and Fnatic made the game way worse by walking into Grubs with no setup and no numbers, leading to a quick 2-for-0. Now that MKOI has the lead, they should close it out cleanly, right? Well, we've seen how that's gone this tournament, and we got a version of that as MKOI started getting picked out on side a bit. First, it was Ambessa and Alistar teaming up for a topside kill on Jojo, and then Alistar and Cassio teaming up for a botside kill on Jojo again. Kill score is now even and Herald is spawning, but at the Herald fight, Elyoya found a really nice ult to carry the fight. Now that MKOI has the lead, they should close it out cleanly, right? Well, we've seen how that's gone this tournament, and we got yet another version of that as MKOI went for a 4-man invade only to blow all of their cooldowns on a Pantheon E, in which Fnatic turned around and got 2 kills. Luckily for MKOI, Fnatic would step up way too aggressively on midwave before next dragon spawned, and Supa found a nice angle to go forward and pick up a few kills. With this lead, MKOI finally stabilized the game and pick up all the objectives before eventually destroying the enemy nexus. If you're an MKOI fan wondering why the 11-1 Zeri and the 7-0 Qiyana only have a 6 out of 10 rating, the number of throws the team committed when they had their lead should describe it all. I think MKOI did not play super well this game, and against a better team, they may have lost control of their advantages once more. On Fnatic's side, the main reason why they lost control of the game was because of the Grub fight, which was entirely Razork and Mickey's fault, but even when they got back into decent positions later, nobody could fight well enough or position well enough to make anything of it. I did end up bumping Mickey back up to a 4 though, due to the sheer amount of positive plays he made to go along with his negative ones. Game 2 was a nice little punchback from Fnatic. This game featured one of the most creative level 1s I've seen in a while. Mickey went Ignite Hail of Blades on Poppy, and he flashed onto the Bard and instantly ignited him before the heal came through, and with the aggressive Keystone, Fnatic were able to pick up the 2v2 kill right away. Then, with the MKOI bot lane in bad shape, Razork found the Dragon Pit wraparound gank to get yet another kill, putting MKOI in a huge deficit. Part of this was Mickey's Rune and Summoner spell setup, part of it was the lack of prio mid due to the Kassadin which allowed Razork to play how he wanted, and part of it was Razork taking advantage of Jarvan's strength early game, whereas Wukong has to be more passive until level 6. Regardless of which ones Fnatic were thinking of, this early game was very clean from them, no notes. For the first 8 minutes, Razork and Mickey kept running around the map finding advantages and generating pressure, leading to good setup on Grubs. MKOI walked in to fight it anyway 3v4, which I think is a bad decision, but Fnatic hesitated on the engage and ended up blowing spells on the Spell Shield Sivir as MKOI got out scot-free. Fnatic ended up with 2 Grubs, but it wasn't pretty. Then, for the next 5 minutes, I was not particularly happy with how Fnatic played. Despite a sizable lead everywhere, they seemed to stop generating any pressure at all, way too passive for my tastes. I think part of it was Upset not being willing to step up more aggressively on midwave, but another part of it was definitely Razork and Mickey opting out of playing for that midwave much. Regardless, they were rightfully punished for this inactivity as MKOI were the ones to set up and claim the Herald. At this point, I actually thought we were heading towards a potential Fnatic throw since MKOI had good scaling and were on decent item spikes, and the fight that would decide the game occurred on midwave as MKOI played for a Herald crash. 3 members of Fnatic went to kill the Herald, and MKOI hard committed on the other 2 members caught out in River. I like this engage a lot from MKOI, but Mickey hit a great Poppy ult to knock the flanking Kassadin out, and then Supa refused to disengage even though the fight should have been called off, which led to a turn from Fnatic that got them 4 kills. Now the game was truly over, and they collected every objective and won the game. I still don't feel like these games are being played great. I don't mean to be overly critical of EU, since I know people also thought I was being too harsh on G2 yesterday, but unfortunately, my eyes simply aren't impressed by the gameplay of these teams. I feel like I see more throws from bad positioning in these games than I do comebacks from good positioning from better teams. Either way, I still expect MKOI to win Game 3, but we'll see who comes out more ready to win the series. Game 3 was the most lose-in-peace game I've seen in a while. I feel like the ratings should tell the story here. I don't necessarily think this is an easy Vayne or Ornn game to pilot, but both Merwin and Supa played out the game as well as they needed to in order to win the team fights. That's about as much praise as I'll give MKOI for this one. Everything else was Fnatic rolling over and dying. Mickey's engages looked pretty lifeless, Upset missed out on potential kills, Poby lost lane to a pretty wild degree but was overall inoffensive and also got a solo kill, so sure. Razork was walking in and dying for fun, and Oscar was dying on timers he shouldn't be dying on as well as looking equally uninspiring in teamfights. Nobody on Fnatic were picking their fight timers well, and none of them looked coordinated. Looking at the series as a whole, the ratings are a bit on the lower side across the board. I think Supa played pretty well this series, everyone else was either fine or below average. For the record, my ratings are out of 10. I know there's only 5 physical stars, but there's 10 different scores since I used half stars. I tried using 10 stars before and people said it looked too crowded, so I went back to 5 stars with half stars, but it's 10 different ratings, so the score is out of 10. Also, a lot of the decimals caused some confusion, so let me explain that too. This series, Supa got a 6, a 4, and a 7 from me, so for the series he got a 17 total, and you divide that by the number of games played, which was 3, so he got an average of 5.67 points per game. I round that to a 5.7, and that's the series score. A lot of the scores will look similar to each other because of this, since when you play 3 games, the only decimals you can get are 0, 3, or 7. Every rating in a 3-game series will end with a 0, 3, or 7, so I get it looks kind of weird, but it's just average score for the series. Fnatic are the first team out of the tournament, and honestly, I think it makes sense. They never truly looked like they were playing through their advantages, even when they had leads. Their draw wasn't good, but it wasn't worst case scenario. They got CFO instead of Gen G, then faced a BLG who has lost to 2 Western teams now, and then drew the LEC 2 seed. If Fnatic deserved to win more games, they would have found a way to beat one of these teams. MKOI managed to get it done today, but I don't feel great about them either. Even in their Game 1 win, it felt like the cracks they usually show against better teams were there. Game 3 was pretty clean from them, but again, my personal read is that Fnatic collapsed on themselves. The 1-2 pool is looking pretty scary for them. I could see them defeating 100 Thieves or Secret Whales, but I'm not sure I would favor them at all. If they draw T1, they're absolutely cooked. Let's move on to the second series of the day to see who our last 1-2 team will be before the draw. Game 1 was a monster stomp for VKS. First, Trimpy found a nice flash double knockup bot lane to get a 2v2 kill, and then there was a team fight at 11 minutes that was initiated by Dasamis. I actually think this was a pretty bad engage by the Xinjiao, and they ended up getting outplayed in the first portion of the fight. However, PSG kept trying to push for an advantage instead of backing off, and Trimpy found another nice double knockup to combo into a double Talia shove as PSG were obliterated. Heading into the Herald fight, VKS were still only up 1k gold, so PSG decided to fight once again. I think the idea of the fight actually wasn't that bad. In my opinion, what should have happened is that Wukong should flash engage on VKS's frontline, and Rakan should follow up on the CC with his ult so he can speed boost to the VKS backline. Then whoever gets hit by the Rakan CC, Mbessa should ult and they can play the fight from there. Instead, Woody tried to engage first and face planted into the enemy team and got one shot, and with no CC left in the fight, Mbessa whiffed her ult as well and VKS hard won yet another fight. PSG would take their last stand as they spotted out Talia walking over a control ward on red buff, and again, I think the angle is okay, but the spells were used in the wrong order. Karsa should flash engage on the Talia and then immediately W behind her before the knockup ends so that the rocks that come out don't stun him, and then he should W in the direction Talia wants to flash. Then he can play for the second knockup on her with all of her dashes still up and maybe get the shot down or have Mbessa follow up with her flash ult. Instead, he Ws over the wall and then tries to flash after her for the second knockup, which Talia can easily flash out of since the Wukong is on vision the whole time. I mention this because as a Wukong main, it's absolutely a pet peeve seeing Wukong players engage with W first instead of flash. PSG probably lose this fight anyway since their backline got one shot, but either way, this is the last fight PSG can afford to lose, and VKS completely destroy them in every fight afterwards. Overall, pretty clean from VKS. They team fought well and reacted extremely quickly to PSG's mistakes. I especially thought Trimpy carried this game pretty hard. His 2 early flash engages were great and got them huge advantages. Morteus, Bowal, and Miru all navigated the game pretty well. I didn't think they had to do much to win after those first couple of fights, but I credited them with making no mistakes to give their leads back. Dasamis I'm keeping at a 5 because I thought his initial engage on that first team fight was actually pretty bad and could have put the game back to a neutral state. For PSG, this was definitely a disaster. Azu laned well but missed all of his ults in fights and got hit by way too many skill shots. Maple and Woody both had bad positioning in multiple fights, and Betty's gameplay was a complete disaster. I thought Karsa was mechanically not very good in this game, but I did think he was playing out the macro properly early at least, so I didn't bother to dock him too hard. PSG looks super out of it, kind of how they looked in regular season, and if they can't figure it out, they might leave the tournament as the only winless team. Game 2 was PSG going back to their comfort comp from domestic play, and they played their usual style to match. Karsa in the enemy jungle for half the game is exactly how PSG got their advantages in the LCP, and it's how they got their advantages early in this game as well. The team worked together to make sure Karsa could get his lead, and the first few teamfights went exactly even as PSG picked up the objectives, but VKS had a slight kill lead. PSG picked up their first big lead by out-teamfighting on second Drake, but VKS navigated the next set of objectives fairly well and pulled the game back with some nice cross-maps and team plays on side lanes. It actually felt like the game was slipping away from PSG a bit, and VKS decided to start Otacon. They actually played the Otacon situation twice. The first time, Miru tried to engage on Maple, but it wasn't enough so they backed off, and the second time, Trimby tried to engage on Varus, but Betty absorbed the engage well as Karsa massacred the backline. Then VKS decided to try and contest Otacon anyway and chain fed a bit, and PSG leapt out to a massive lead. A few more fights was enough for PSG to win the game. Some of them were scary and VKS was not going down without a fight, but PSG's good positioning and better items were enough to weather the storm as they brought us to an even series score. I gave Karsa a 7 for this game. He overplayed the invades a little bit too much early, but overall he found good leads individually and had some great team fights. Betty did a good job absorbing all of the engages, so I gave him an extra point for that, but all 8 other players had a mix of good and bad plays this game. Desamis, for example, did well in the 7-minute period where VKS were fighting back and starting to build a lead, but before and after that he was definitely a big reason why they lost. I also thought Boal was playing way too aggressively in fights and ended up taking more damage than necessary, which made the game hard to play for his carries. We'll see how Game 3 goes. This is somewhat how I thought the series would go, as it's been a back and forth fiesta decided by whichever team happens to have more people in form when the big fights come. VKS seems way smarter around the map and are playing cleaner in fights, but they're also making more mistakes in critical moments. I have no idea who will win Game 3. Game 3 was a slow burn. I thought VKS had a much better team comp heading in. They had solid counters across the board for lanes and it felt pretty impossible for PSG to pull off their dive. The game, however, was not smooth sailing. Desamis found a kill level 1 off a good invade, but VKS threw it back by fistfighting on the counter invade for red buff and losing pretty hard. Miru notably missed a pretty vital Q on this fight that should have been unmissable, and initially I was going to credit Miru with this huge throw. The only reason why this game took so long was because realistically VKS should have stomped, but fighting back from the large early deficit took a lot of effort. PSG would maintain the lead until the 11-minute mark where they went for a dive on Miru, but it was a massive overforce and VKS were able to collect a few kills and bring the game back to even. The big play that got VKS ahead was a good angle to dive Betty mid lane with the Nocturne and Yunara, which got them a few more kills, and now they were in full control for the rest of the game. That said, VKS definitely were not clean to close this one out. They had a 9k gold lead for a while, but played the 4th Dragon standoff pretty badly, and later down the line, they failed to take Baron even with their massive advantage. In fact, the game actually ended up coming down to a very close teamfight where VKS almost got wiped, but they were able to survive on blinking health bars and win the game. Despite Miru throwing the early game fight, I thought he played well enough for the rest of the fights that I decided to put him all the way back to a 6, and overall I thought everyone on VKS navigated this game pretty solidly. The one person who I gave a 5 to was Desamis for being the main reason why the late game Drake fight got as dicey as it did. On PSG's side, I thought Maple and Karsa both made way too many mistakes to close this one out, especially since Maple was the one with the massive lead early game. With this, PSG is the second team out of the tournament. I should have stuck with my gut and knew this would happen. I actually did think PSG were the worst team at the tournament heading in. I got brainwashed by their early game success against the LCK, my bad everyone. As they showed domestically, PSG just do not have what it takes to get a game across the finish line. They can be aggressive early and get leads, but they're super passive and vegan in mid-game situations, which we saw in all of their series. As for VKS, they definitely looked better today. In their other best of ones, they had tragedies too quickly to show their stuff, but I definitely like how they find advantages in mid-games. They were playing side lane and map movements way better than PSG. It was the biggest reason why they won today in my opinion. Series MVP could have gone to either Morteus or Trimby, but I'll give it to Trimby because I feel like he was always at the center of every huge play VKS had. We got our draws for round 4 of Swiss stage, and Wednesday should be a banger. First up is the draw every Western fan wanted, G2 versus Fly. We'll finally get to see which region is superior this year, and the winner of this match goes to quarterfinals. I'm predicting FlyQuest 2-1 over G2. I think G2 have a lot of X factor that can lead to fighting hard against Eastern teams, but Fly is very good at punishing teams who are equal or worse than them in mid-games, and I do think G2 is a team who can make a few mistakes here and there for Fly to exploit. Also, I think G2 has not looked amazing at this tournament so far. I don't want to read into it too much because obviously BO1s are terrible, but G2 did not look clean against BLG in their most recent win, whereas it felt like Fly has been in lockdown mode for their past 2 games. I get that BLG is a more difficult draw than Secret Whales and VKS, but I thought BLG has also looked pretty terrible this tournament too. I'm going to side with Fly's clean mid games, but I wouldn't be shocked at the result either way. Next up is Gen G versus Top Esports, and this one is super easy for me. Even in their loss to AL, Gen G looked pretty clean. On the flip side, Top Esports have started their notorious collapse of the week showing against KT, and I expect them to keep choking, especially when up against the tournament favorites. I have Gen G 2-0 for this series. That's all I have for you for this one. I recently started a Patreon for people who want to support me more while I'm making these videos. I have 3 tiers, each with varying amounts of benefits, including different types of behind the scenes content, and even a custom Poro drawing that I'll display in video outros. If that interests you, check out the Patreon link in the description. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye!